Hi, thank you for joining us at the Africa Security Symposium for this panel on communications and security. My name is Roger Sels. I'm the Vice President of Solutions of EMEA for BlackBerry. And today I have Gerard Gosu of African Development Bank, Dr. Catherine Gitau, Chief Executive Officer of Kenya ICT Authority, and Pablo Mudubudi from SAP joining me for this discussion. Welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Dr. Catherine, maybe we can start with you. Could you please introduce yourself to the audience?
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Catherine Gitau. I'm the CEO of the ICT Authority, which is a state corporation under the Ministry of ICT and Youth in Kenya. And this is a state corporation that takes care of the infrastructure, ICT infrastructure and systems of government, capacity building and standards. So basically we keep the government running in terms of ICT. My background, I have a long career in academia at the University of Nairobi, where I ended up as the director of the School of Computing and Informatics. I've also worked in NEPAD. I've worked in the government of Kenya for about 10 years. And I've served on various bodies, including the United Nations Governmental Group of Experts in Cybersecurity. So I am responsible for information security, especially the hygiene aspects in government. And as I say, I've sat in international policy making in cybersecurity. I'll stop there.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Gerard, if we can come to you for a quick introduction, please.
Okay, my name is Gerard Gosu. I'm based in Abidjan, Ivory Coast, or Côte d'Ivoire. I'm responsible for information security at African Development Bank in Abidjan, Côte d'Ivoire. Okay, my background is essentially IT and IT security. I synergize nearly 30 years of experience in multiple areas, including information security management, business continuity, disaster recovery management, network and security infrastructure administration, business application development, physical security. I hold an IT engineer, in fact, a degree and a master degree in management organization, management and of organization as well. So that's where I'm going to stop.
Perfect, thank you. And Pablo, if I may come to you for an introduction, please.
Okay, thank you. My name is Pablo Mudubudi, and I'm sitting here in South Africa. I work for an organization called SAP. SAP is a Swedish defense company, but over time they have grown to become a very global defense powerhouse. My position within SAP is that I'm a marketing executive as well as business development responsible for South Africa and Ghana as well as Zambia. So I've been working quite close with these different defense forces as well as border management authorities. And my focus is in airborne systems, border surveillance, and as well as communication intelligence. I have an international marketing degree from the Tshwane University of Technology here in Pretoria, South Africa. And that's where I'll stop.
Perfect, thank you. And just to close off the introductions, I'll quickly add mine. So Roger Sels, Vice President of Solutions at BlackBerry. I'm based in Dubai. Prior to joining BlackBerry, I was the Chief Information Security Officer for Dark Matter in Abu Dhabi. Dark Matter was a cybersecurity consulting firm mainly servicing defense and intelligence companies in the Meta region. And prior to that, I have experience as an interim CISO for a number of large financial Fortune 50 companies. And then in the 15 years leading up to that, have led a number of more technical teams. And then if you go far enough in my background, performed ethical hacking, reverse engineering, incident response, that type of service. And this is also where I'll stop. Well, great to have you all on the panel today. Maybe as a first topic of discussion, I was wondering really that, well, with the situation that we've all been in, and after working a couple of months from home, surely everybody has learned some key lessons to adjust their cybersecurity practices. And could you please share with us some key cyber hygiene tips for companies to reduce cyber risks during this COVID pandemic? Gerard, maybe you can start and share your thoughts, please.
Okay. Effectively, this situation has been tough for all of us. And as we know, criminals use vulnerabilities and global events or crises as opportunities to launch cyber attacks. And in the context of COVID pandemic, phishing and ransomware are on the rise. Okay, so we learned a lot. We learned a lot from the situation. We were prepared to work remotely, not at the extent of the company, but we successfully adapt ourselves to the situation and make our company able to work fully remotely. So to mitigate the risk of being victims, there are effectively key topics that SMA should successfully address. And some of those that I consider of top priorities as follow. We can assume that we have management buy-in, and that also in companies we have someone who is dedicated and responsible for cybersecurity management. I know that's not all the time the case in small and medium enterprises, but those two things are really key. People think that having just antivirus installed on computers, that's enough to be protected, but they need to do more. So we need to get management buy-in, and we need management to appoint someone who is dedicated and responsible for cybersecurity management. And that said, each enterprise normally should have a strategy with regard to information security and cybersecurity, or information security, globally speaking, and also develop the policy, the standards, and the procedure that should be used, and ensure that those are implemented so that things are done in another manner instead of trying to do things and face attacks, because when attacks occur, sometimes it's too late. Okay, so I will advise a company to perform regular risk assessment. They may not have the skills inside, but the companies or other providers are available to help them do that. And having people from outside doing also those kind of risk assessment help them to really find out what is wrong and what they should address and prioritize, because you can't address everything at the same time. The second thing I would say is to have backups, to perform regular backups, because with the ransomware, we know that if you don't have backups, it will be really difficult for you to face the situation. Third thing that I would say will be to develop a sound cybersecurity awareness program. With human, let's say employees remain the weakest link in cybersecurity. So improving the knowledge and behaviors will help the company reduce cyber risk. Third thing will be to perform scan of IT systems and application of security updates regular basis. This will help them to reduce their exposure to vulnerability. And the fourth one will be to ensure that they select, acquire, and implement appropriate technologies. We have so many technology around. So it will be good for those companies to get advices on what to really select instead of just jump on the people who are, let's say, the best in marketing, but to get appropriately what they need. And finally, I would say all companies need to define and develop incident management plan. If you are not prepared to face the incident when it's occurred, sometimes it's too late. So those are few things that I would like to share here, and I'm open with the panel to discuss those topics.
I think those are really key points that you touched on. Building that, well, first of all, that delegation from the top to somebody that is empowered to set up the program and then programmatically approach the risk reduction targets, setting up the policies, frequently testing, as you said, is quite key. And that incident preparedness, especially in today's context, has shown that organizations that had already done this in the past are more resilient today, and they are more agile and were able to continue. I know that as the maturity is quite different across the region, especially where I sit in the Middle East, compared to, for instance, clients I'm talking to in Europe, it was a complete difference in that in Europe, they were already prepared. They just had to, let's say, invest a bit more in licensing and they were up and running. Whereas here, the choice still had to be made. People still had to adapt to the remote way of working. Is that something that you also are seeing here in the region?
Yeah, exactly. You know, in Africa, we know that not all companies have, let's say, in terms of finance, enough money to invest deeply in information security or cybersecurity. The second thing is also in terms of skills. We don't have enough skills around. And that's where I think that there's something to do to improve that aspect of cybersecurity management.
No, I agree. And while a lot has been written about the global shortage of cybersecurity professionals, what are some of the challenges of acquiring security staff, especially for the public sector? And what can we do to address these issues, Dr. Catherine?
Sorry, and good afternoon, everyone. I was just saying that there's the famous study by IBM, which talked about a global shortage of 3.5 million cybersecurity professionals. The experience we have here in the public sector is in Kenya, of course, we have a very vibrant financial and telco sector that snap up the cybersecurity professionals in the market. Their salaries tend to be quite high compared with our public sector scales. And so sometimes we just become a training ground. They join us when they're young and fresh. They train in our environment. And then when they're oven ready, they're ready to move on. But this is not a bad thing, because this is one of the roles of the public sector is actually to grow the sector. So it's not a bad thing that we are able to attract young professionals who perhaps are not ready and spend public funds on training and developing them. And that helps us because eventually we have a stronger private sector that is able to meet our needs. So that is one of the strategies. Take them in when they're young and fresh and build them up. Another strategy is to make our jobs interesting. So for example, I said I work in cybersecurity policy. So I have been able to attract people from the private sector, and simply because they want to have a more well-rounded career, where they're working on a variety of issues around security, because we do a lot of policy, we do standards, we do training, and so they're able to build their career. Also, I mean, I shouldn't say this, but there's often a lot of chaos in public sector because we're dealing with hundreds of different institutions, from schools, hospitals, different kinds of public agencies. And because of this, it really gives somebody a very broad insight into a wide variety of security environments and hard problems and challenges to solve. And of course, the feeling that you're contributing to society and contributing to ordinary people. So there are many people who stay with us, and some also who've taken a pay cut to join the public sector. The last thing I'll mention is we train. We do a lot of in-house training. We always try to maintain a generous training budget. And we also use CSR-oriented training, which is offered by various companies pro bono, especially for our interns and our young staff. So this is one way. Instead of having people who are fully experienced, as I said, we're able to get the youngsters. They're lean, they're mean, they're hungry, and they're ready to work into all nights and all day if possible. So these are some of the methods we use to mitigate the shortages, but that doesn't say that we don't have shortages. Yes, we'd love to have more people, and we'd also love to have more resources to continuously train them to the level that we require.
I love that approach, and thank you for sharing. If I go far back in my career, let's say 17 years ago, I was lucky to set up an international SOC. And at the time, you couldn't hire security analysts because it wasn't a skill that was developed in the market. So at the time, I also set up a program to train them from the ground up. And we had all kinds of people coming in from diverse backgrounds, even non-IT backgrounds. So we started with, let's say, a foundation course in operating systems, networking, then some security, and building them up gradually. And it's probably one of the most rewarding things I was able to do in my career. Because some of these people have gone on to make a very successful career and contribution in cybersecurity elsewhere, as you said. Because then once you've finally built them up, they get poached invariably. So that's something I see, but it's definitely something that's happening even within the private sector. You always have a bigger organization that is going to look for this talent. Thank you for sharing that. I was also actually wondering, because, well, as the ICT authority that's running that large education project, digital literacy program, you're managing, I think, somewhere around 8,000–9,000 kilometers of fiber, delivering internet, email, web service to the public sector. You already mentioned, well, they're all quite different. Not everybody will be at the same level of maturity. What are your cybersecurity priorities then, and have these been impacted by the pandemic, Dr. Catherine?
First, I'll agree with Gerard. Awareness creation is really important because COVID at least has moved people from their normal applications. You know, many people were just involved in desktop type activities and in the workplace where maybe we're able to secure our networks. Now they're working from home. They're trying out new solutions, both for their social life as well as their working life. And it's quite difficult to be in control because you don't actually know exactly what people are doing at any time, where they're working from, because it's not always from their home either. They could be on the move. They could also be in a cyber cafe or some other public place. So people who, you have to continuously reinforce the message, especially because the private device feels very personal. But I think as we converse, I can probably add more because we really want to hear from Pablo and everyone. So I'll expound more as I answer my other questions.
Sure. Thank you. Pablo, I was actually going to come to you and ask you, well, you work for SAP, but how does SAP fit into the security landscape as solution provider then?
Okay, so I mentioned, but just to Dr. Catherine's point, with regards to, people working differently and people working from home now, of course you would need a secured line. So fortunately, we work for, it's a Swedish company, and the security has been very strict, and the rollout of the security to our different offices across the world has been quite good. And you can imagine in our industry, normally when you engage with customers, it's on a face-to-face basis. So now with COVID-19, we had to just take a step back and communicate with customers through different sort of mediums. But in that sense, we had to be very selective, take into consideration how sensitive our industry is, because really we'll be discussing quite strategic, sensitive things, and they're quite sensitive and central to the defense and security of these different countries. So we really had to, roll out, systems and the communication systems that will be secure enough for us to have those discussions. But that won't, of course, replace face-to-face conversations, but we had to somehow make it work. And I think from that point of view, I think, a lot of companies have gone a long way in ensuring that there is a secure sort of way to actually communicate with the customers. But you were asking about SAP. I mentioned earlier that, SAP, it's one of the very few companies, defense companies in the world that provides solutions for airborne systems, for land systems, as well as naval or sea defense systems. Okay, and we support different countries. We also support border management authorities. And of late, there is a border management agency that has been established here in South Africa, and they will be looking at procuring border surveillance systems that will be able to assist them to detect drones that are flying at a very low level. Very small drones can be detected from a 5 kilometer or 10 kilometer distance. So SAP is a very broad company, and with broad capabilities for different domains.
Perfect, thank you. And as I hear you, Dr. Catherine, expand on that work from home, I guess one of the key challenges there is being able to trust in the identity of the people that are working remotely. And we're now seeing more and more solutions around zero trust coming up. Gerard, I see you shaking your head. Maybe this is something where you can share some insights as well. Or you are on mute, I think.
Yeah, I'm back now. Yeah, effectively, in fact, with regard to working from home, working remotely, the challenges we are facing is not only about identity of people working from home. We have also the update issue, because people, in fact, they don't need to use, let's say, the VPN connectivity, which is the virtual private network connectivity, to work. Some of them can work, and it's only when they need to access the internal applications that they need to connect to the network, to the infrastructure. So some of them remain disconnected for a long period, for weeks sometimes, because they have access to the emails without being connected to the network. And one challenge that we have is to ensure that the updates of the system are occurring regularly. So we have to also educate users and request them at least once in a week to be connected to our network and to leave the computer connected for at least 1 hour to get those updates. So with regard to the identity aspect, it's remains a challenge. So there, we're using the monitoring system to ensure that we know what's going on our computers, and we're not seeing anything suspicious. If there's anything suspicious, then we can react quickly and ensure that we still have the right person connected to our system. Yeah. Makes
sense. But still, I mean, in these times, companies are falling victim to attacks, successful phishing and ransomware attacks, regardless of the technical controls sometimes that they have in place, up to the point that some businesses will already have failed, unfortunately. What do you think could be the role and strategic actions that governments could take to strengthen the cybersecurity defense strategy and capacity of companies in Africa?
Yeah, I'm glad Catherine is connected, because I think we can learn a lot from her. And because from my perspective, what I think is that each government should create a national cybersecurity agency, authority, or office, or it doesn't matter what name they give to it. And I think that among the responsibilities that such agency or office should have is to develop and coordinate the implementation of a comprehensive and innovative national cybersecurity strategy, so that we know that the cybersecurity is something which is key and considered as important at the government level. One other responsibility will be to foster the definition of cybersecurity laws covering corporate governance, insurance matters, criminal activities, how let's say, businesses should also ensure that they have cybersecurity as priority. That's one second aspect. The third one will be to develop and implement a national cybersecurity awareness program. And I think that Catherine office is doing that one as well. And that's what I'm saying, that we can learn a lot from her. This will help to improve cybersecurity culture at both citizens and business levels. A fourth one will be to create collaborative kernel with a private sector in the field, and recommend initiative and measure from the government to promote, facilitate, and increase the cybersecurity response capabilities at the citizen and business and country levels. And the fifth one will be to set up and empower a national cybersecurity incident response office to monitor cybersecurity threats and coordinate the response to cybersecurity incident countrywide. I know that in some countries, for instance, when there is an attack at the company level, the government have set up some standards so that when you fail responding to the incident within some threshold time, then you have to report it to government, and from there, some government even send experts to the office, to the company, to deal with the issue. Because now that you know that cybersecurity can be also at the country level, governments, they don't know if what is starting at the company level will reach the whole country. So those are few things that I think should be a top priority at government level. But I think that Catherine can teach us a bit about it, based on her experience in the field.
Yeah, Catherine, and thank you for sharing this, Gerard. I think you made a number of really relevant and good points there. But Catherine, I think we're all looking to you to add to that, please, with your take.
I think we're all feeling our way, but it's helpful to have institutions and agencies that are devoted to this subject, because there's a lot to learn. You never quite know where things are going to go. For example, in Kenya, for a long time, cybersecurity has focused very much on the financial area, because obviously no one likes to lose money, and we're famous for moving our money electronically. So when COVID came along, and suddenly we needed the technology in order to work because of teleconferencing and home for office, and then for school, where kids were also doing online learning. Now, what happens then is something that maybe you could not have really anticipated. That is, you've sent your civil servant home with his or her device. And there's the child needs the device to learn. So what do you think is going to happen at that point? This child could be a 6-year-old where maybe the risk is not all that much, but it could also be a teenager who starts experimenting now with the access to the internet and doing all kinds of things. And an unaware parent will, of course, have given the passwords either by accident or by design. So I like what you said about identity, that, you know, am I talking to my officer, or is it the teenager who part of the time is watching Netflix, or part of the time is playing around, downloading, or trying to experiment about how to get into the dark web, and part of the time is doing their schoolwork. So how do you talk to the parent at this point? You know, it's actually a social problem, because no one is going to sacrifice the lives of their children. There's a balance. Yeah, so we are learning all the time. Yes, we have institutions. Yes, we're doing what we can to create awareness in the conventional sense. We now have 2 cyber-related laws in Kenya, which were passed in the last 18 months or so. And there's also a critical infrastructure policy which is coming up, which we hope will also create a critical infrastructure law. So those are very important activities. But we also have the day-to-day operations where we're continuously surprised by the new things which are happening, and we have to think on our feet and respond, whether our response is technical or sociological or official. It could be any of those 3 things, depending on what is happening. The last thing I'll say is collaboration is really important. We have a CERT, it sits in a different agency, but we're in communication all the time, because we cannot do good cyber hygiene unless the cyber defense community is continuously telling us what the new risks, threats, and incidences are. Neither can they truly defend unless they also understand where we are in terms of what we're doing in our protective and cleaning activities. And so we're in communication, we work together closely. We have even started doing joint projects. So I think collaboration is really, really important in this area between the agencies and the institutions and the users.
Well, and then I would even add to that collaboration, even between public sector and the private sector, because ultimately technology can be an enabler to improve the efficiency and effectiveness in a number of areas. For instance, where we from BlackBerry have been helping public institutions, and private institutions actually as well, is just unburdening their staff so that they can allocate the same teams to do more meaningful things. So that resonated when you mentioned it earlier. But I think, Pablo, from your perspective, you're also trying to improve that efficiency and effectiveness, but as it more pertains to border security operations. And then maybe you can shed some light on some of those technological solutions that you're positioning to help in this regard and collaborate, as Catherine just mentioned.
Yeah, so the collaboration that Dr. Catherine just mentioned is absolutely crucial in sort of our field, because there's new technologies that pop up every time, and we need the different agencies to cover the bases and come together, collaborate, share the information. So in terms of the working of the intelligence, from intelligence part, because from a defense point of view, we work quite closely with the defense intelligence of the different armed forces. I think it's important that the primary factor in that sense is how information is collected, processed, analyzed, as well as distributed. And we have different types of sensors and sources within the intelligence world today. And we need to be able to fuse all these sources into a single system, extract the relevant information, and make sense of the masses of data. And for intelligence agencies as well, we are able to provide communications monitoring solutions that cover spectrum of emissions, and that will allow agencies to extract that relevant data I'm referring to. So recently we won a contract in Brazil, won a contract in Brazil for a border management agency. And it covers different forms of agency, as I mentioned earlier on. So there's human intelligence, there's electronic intelligence, and as well as communication intelligence that needs to be covered. And in terms of just the process from an intelligence gathering point of view, you first have to be able to detect, the different, HF, VHF, and as well as UHF radio frequency. And you can, after that, be able to do direction finding using mapping, Google Maps, and be able to pinpoint where the communication is coming from an adversary or an enemy point of view. And you also need to be able to record the different conversations from your enemy and be able to analyze the information that they're giving you from an intelligence point of view. And if you break it down in terms of the classification of the data, there's also machine learning that is also involved in this, in a sense that you need to teach the machine the different languages. You need to teach the machine the different word spotting, as well as the conversations that you're interested in. You need to also teach the machine the different types of tones, whether this is a male or a female. So it's an integrated sort of communication intelligence fusion system that is needed in terms of a border control point of view.
Yeah, it's very interesting that you mentioned that, Pablo, because as you were saying that and highlighting these challenges in collecting that information, making it, into actionable intelligence for the defense industry, I think obviously that is a challenge that we were faced with more broadly within the cyber realm, where nowadays cyber no longer is a human scale problem, and we're generating these vast quantities of data. That also means that to aggregate all of that data, to process it, it's if you depend on humans to do it, it will be slower. I think it was Gerard that mentioned then, or maybe Dr. Catherine initially as well, that then you have a job that is not that interesting for people to perform. So it's great to hear how you've been overcoming these challenges. I also know that we've received, meanwhile, a question from Mr. Peter Crafter with the NSSL Global Government Director. And the question is, given the geographic limitations of traditional VHF radio communications, how do you anticipate overcoming beyond line of sight challenges in remote or insecure environments? How important is security over these potential means? Pablo, that seems like the ideal question for you. Can you share your view, please?
Yeah, so we have sort of different sort of antennas that can cover different distances, as well as the different radio frequencies as well. And I mentioned during my explanation earlier on that we cover HF, VHF, as well as UHF. And with regards to VHF, that's actually one of our sort of speciality in a sense, because of the type of antennas that we use that would be able to cover the whole spectrum. So of course it's quite important to be able to manage these different threats on different frequencies, and it's also quite important to have the different equipment and sort of systems as well that will be able to give you that coverage throughout the whole spectrum.
Perfect, thank you. Dr. Catherine, Gerard, anything that you'd like to add to this specific topic?
Not specifically from my side. I'm fine.
Perfect, thank you.
Well, I'm far from an expert. I think most of the times the challenges I get is about complaints about spectrum squatting. Because spectrum is a rare resource. People in the rural areas and in remote areas, they want access, and yet the spectrum belongs to a company which perhaps is not using it, maybe is saving it up for the future. So this has been more of the conversation rather than security, because the concern now is the social applications like education and work. But I'm sure in many countries, one of the chief cyber squatters is defense, because they do maintain certain parts of the spectrum for their own uses. So I think there'll always be a tension between the security forces and the defense forces having secured part of the spectrum, and then the demand for social digital services in remote areas. And maybe, I don't know if somebody can say more about that, because I'm continuously challenged on this point, especially by civil society. So I don't know what's a good answer.
It's a fair point, but I also need to come to Pablo, who I think is our expert on the panel in these matters. Pablo, is this a tension that you notice more often, where that spectrum is limited and being squatted? Is that can you say something to that?
Not to that point. I mean, from our end, our job is to really provide the solutions to the different agencies. So with regards to the, for lack of a better word, politics or internal politics, in terms of spectrum of the different countries, we don't really concern ourselves in that way. We trust that the country that we are working with will provide spectrum, enough spectrum for all the different agencies and the usage that Dr. Catherine has referred to earlier on. So I must say we don't really concern ourselves that much in terms of who's hogging the spectrum and who's not. So we try to keep away from that.
Perfect, understood. Thank you. I think that's it, because we were aiming for about 1 hour. So I'd like to thank you all for this discussion. I think it was very interesting.
Yeah. Thank you all for the very interesting conversation. It was very different in terms of the type of experiences and knowledge that we all bring to the panel, and I've learned a lot from all three of you from a cybersecurity point of view. And thank you very much for sharing the platform with me.
Thank you too for your contributions. As you said, it was very diverse in backgrounds, but I think we still managed to get a very cohesive discussion that the audience will enjoy. Dr. Catherine, Gerard, thank you as well.